LP little a. And I know in your Substack, you wrote that you were screwed genetically, I think by your dad, in that realm. So talk
Yes.
about what LP little a is and then the genetic tie-in.
So LP little a is the new hotness in the cardiology world. What it is effectively an LDL particle, but has a little tail. So to describe what an LDL particle looks like to generate our foundation, it is a sphere with this primary protein, ApoB, that helps give the LDL particle structure and function, and then there's like fats and cholesterol in the LDL. Now, LP little a differs because in addition to the ApoB, there's something called apolipoprotein A, which is like a little tail, and it's attached to the ApoB. Your a little tail on this LP little a, the apolipoprotein A, is coded for by the LPA gene. And there are a lot of variations in this gene. There are a thing called Kringle repeats. And the number of repeats you have in your genetic code determines how long the tail is and how much LP little a you're producing. So generally, fewer Kringle repeats, a shorter tail, means your LP little a is going to be higher. And it might be because longer tails lead to degradation in the liver before secretion. So LP little a is thought to be about 90% genetically fixed. I got mine from my dad. I got few Kringle repeats, which means I have high LP little a. Mine runs around 160, I believe, which is in the really shitty zone. And there's very little I can do to change it. I can modify my LDL with lifestyle about 5-fold or more. I've had a really hard time budging my LP little a. Now, LP little a is thought to be about 6 times as atherogenic on a per particle basis as LDL. And the way it's thought to promote a cardiovascular risk, there's a few ways. But one way is by binding to clots and kind of perpetuating their growth. In fact, there's a really interesting hypothesis that was brought about by Linus Pauling, who won not one, but 2 Nobel Prizes. And his hypothesis had to do with LP little a being a substitute and a surrogate for vitamin C. So I know this is going on a tangent. I promise I'll bring it back. But a lot of mammals can produce vitamin C. And vitamin C helps with wound healing. But about 40 to 60 million years ago, our primate lineage lost that ability. It's a mutation on a gene called GLO. So we can't make vitamin C. And sometime after that, we generated the ability to produce LP little a, which, like vitamin C, can basically promote wound healing, which is good in an evolutionary context because you won't bleed out and you might have better reproductive fitness. The cost is if it's causing clots to grow in your vessels, you could have higher rates of cardiovascular disease. So it's kind of a trade-off that evolution does. There's a lot of examples of this. It's called antagonistic pleiotropy. It's the fancy term. But bottom line, there's an evolutionary rationale. It might be that LP little a is a surrogate for vitamin C since we can't make our own. Now, this is a really interesting point. If this were the case, you might expect the other animals that can make vitamin C don't have LP little a. Tends to be true. Not only that, but the other animals that can't make vitamin C, like old world primates and humans, another example is guinea pigs, or the European hedgehog, they do make LP little a. So there's this interesting convergence. Bottom line, LP little a is thought to be an adaptation to promote wound healing and also clot growth. In the current context, it can cause or exacerbate cardiovascular disease. There are other reasons it can do this, including its relationship to oxidized phospholipids, but at a high level, you can think about it that way. And for a long time, it wasn't the big focus because there was nothing we could do about it. Now, people can disagree with this statement, but a lot of medicine, the spotlight of medicine, is driven by economics. There are now 5 big drugs in development to lower LP little a, some lowering it as much as 99%. So I think that's probably why it's become a center of cardiology discussions now, because we're on the cusp of being able to modify it with medications. And there's still a lot of question over things that we can do lifestyle-wise to potentially alter LP little a risk. So we can talk about that. I was surprised, I'll just say before I pass it back to you, with how popular that letter was. It was my most popular newsletter of about 100 to date. And it seems like a niche thing. I'm like, I wouldn't expect the general public to know about Lp(a), but people were fascinated. So about a quarter of people have high Lp(a), and it seems to be a topic of even general public interest. So I'll pause and get your reactions and questions.
Okay, so highly genetic.
Yes.
Given that, is it the type of thing we only need to test one time for?
People say that. So the guidelines, I think, European, United States, like India, China, like a lot of country guidelines say everybody should be tested once. But after that, it's genetically set. So current guidelines say you test once.
Okay, given what we're about to get into, I'm hoping practical steps to influence it and bring it down.
Yeah.
Although we can't, it sounds like, change it a whole lot. That would allude us to believe that testing again would make sense.
Yeah.
Let's get practical. Somebody like you, obviously you have an interest more than others in this as somebody that has a high level. What is it you're doing practically to control or bring that down?
This is something I'm very new to. I will drop a whole newsletter on vitamin C for heart health, which relates to Lp(a). In fact, I'm going to drop it 2 days from when we're recording this. That provides a lot of practical information. But I want to frame this by saying guidelines say test once. The existing high rigor trials say there's not much you can do about it. But what is evidence-based and what is biological reality are two hugely different things. And so guidelines aren't going to recommend things where there's not rigorous trials, and rigorous trials on things that don't make money probably aren't going to be conducted, at least not as much and as frequently. So what that means, what I'm implying, is there's a huge area of unknown with respect to how we might be able to modify Lp(a). A few things I'll hit off the bat. Higher saturated fat tends to lower Lp(a). It increases LDL, it does. And so I'm not going to provide a judgment on the net effect, but higher saturated fat intake does tend to lower Lp(a). Additionally, niacin, which is a B vitamin, can lower Lp(a). This is known in the literature. It's not recommended because there haven't been clinical benefits proven. And like anything, there can be off-target and negative consequences. So I'm not using niacin, although I know some cardiologists who recommend it, and it can lower Lp(a) by about 25%, I think, on average. Also, while statins increase Lp(a) by about 30%, actually, no, I think the meta-analysis showed 10 to 20. Scratch the 20-30. I think 10 to 20 for statins. PCSK9 inhibitors, which are another medication, can lower Lp(a). So there are a lot of things I just mentioned I want to review. Saturated fat can lower Lp(a). Niacin can lower Lp(a). PCSK9 inhibitors can lower Lp(a). Statins tend to increase them. That's not to put a net value judgment on any of those things, just what the literature shows. But what I find more interesting than that is vitamin C. I mentioned Linus Pauling had this hypothesis about vitamin C or Lp(a) being basically a surrogate or replacement for vitamin C. So you might hypothesize that if you high dose vitamin C, it might have some benefits. The benefits probably would not be exerted by lowering Lp(a) per se. And the trials don't show that's the case. But there are ways in which it might make Lp(a) less sticky. So basically less able to bind to clots. So even for the same Lp(a) level, you might have less atherogenicity. And there's some animal model data to suggest that would be the case. And if you want me to complete the story of the protocol I'm going to try, I'll add one more element, which is lysine. So lysine is an amino acid, part of proteins. And the way Lp(a) actually binds, basically it's like if you think of a rock climber, this is the handhold onto which the Lp(a) rock climber holds, is lysine binding sites. Lysine binding sites to lysine. That is the connection. And so if you provide lysine, like exogenous lysine, you supplement this amino acid, there's some idea that it can basically block the lysine binding sites and also make Lp(a) less sticky. So the combination, I described this in the newsletter coming out in a little bit more detail with references, and we can link that. The combination of vitamin C, probably dosed at around 1 to 2 grams, so 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day, and lysine at around 2-ish grams, might make Lp(a) less sticky. And it also might change levels of related molecules, like an inflammatory molecule called IL-6, which might synergize with Lp(a) to lead to worse outcomes. So even if you're not reducing Lp(a), you're reducing the damage, hypothetically, from Lp(a) by making it less sticky and reducing other molecules that perpetuate the damage done by Lp(a), if that makes sense. It's very speculative because it's very hard to study. It would be hard to do a study in humans. And also, what are you exactly measuring? Because it's like it's not just the Lp(a) level. It's so much more complex than that. They've actually shown in animal models that if you supplement vitamin C, it can reduce the accumulation of Lp(a) in arteries. Thing is, you can't do that study on yourself or with your doctor because they need to do a dissection of your arteries and then stain that. So the circulating levels might not reflect how much is actually accumulating in the arteries. So all that said, given my high Lp(a), I am experimenting with a vitamin C lysine combination at 1 to 2 grams vitamin C and 1 to 2 grams lysine. All the details will be in my newsletter on that topic. I might be able to do some serial testing on things like oxidized phospholipids, IL-6. We will see, but very interesting topic. And exploding area in cardiology and lipidology with a lot of avenues for practical lifestyle innovation, I think.
Okay, you've made it clear it's not about just bringing that number down, Lp(a). You touched on a couple markers it sounds like you're going to look at when you do this experiment.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're going to test before and after Lp(a) as well.
Mm-hmm. We'll see. I mean, if it lowers, great. I just
it's
don't.
Part of the picture, right? Again, not the whole picture.
It's worth measuring. It's just about what I would predict. So I don't predict it to change, but if I do this, I will measure it. So I'm just exploring how exactly I want to do it.
What will the total array of tests be before and after? And what to you will determine success?
I would say the key things to look at for me will be interleukin 6. Interleukin 6 is an inflammatory molecule that synergizes with Lp(a) to exacerbate plaque development. So seeing IL-6 go down will be good. I will say my inflammation markers at baseline are probably low. So I'd just like to see a low IL-6 overall. If it's very low to start, it might not go down. If it's elevated to start, I'd like to see it go down. Oxidized phospholipids. So part of the harm of Lp(a) might have to do with the fact that it carries a lot of damaged polyunsaturated fats, oxidized phospholipids. You can think of it as like a reservoir for oxidized phospholipids. In fact, if you reduce oxidized phospholipids, even at higher Lp(a) levels, there's some suggestion that you reduce the harm. So part of the damage from Lp(a) might have to do with these oxidized polyunsaturated fats. So if you provide antioxidants, including vitamin C, there's data showing it should lower oxidative stress and maybe lower oxidized phospholipids. So I'd like to see OXPLs, oxidized phospholipids, go down. I will also measure oxidized LDL. I don't expect it to go down as much just because of a nuance of like what the test is actually measuring. But markers of oxidative stress broadly. There are a lot of those you can get, MDA, oxidized phospholipids, OXPL, but I think the OXPL is most interesting, so I'd like to see that go down. I'll also get an Lp(a), and we'll see what happens with it. And those are the main ones. Obviously, things like a general lipid panel as well, and maybe some other markers of inflammation, general markers like an hsCRP. But I think the interesting ones are IL-6, Lp(a), and oxidized phospholipids. So if people want to do N=1 on themselves kind of thing, those are the things I'd probably get measured. I am exploring actually developing a platform of my own where people can do, get tests in a safe and guided manner. We'll have a bunch of clinicians working on the platform once it launches, probably later this year, maybe early next year. But vitamin C and lysine's pretty inert. People want to play around with it. the physiology is quite fascinating. So if people have high Lp(a), what I'd ask them to do is just engage with the content that I and others will be producing around it. If you ask questions, share your insights from your own tests, self-experiments, whatever. It's a discussion that I think needs to be had and amplified. And I'd love to be part of that discussion. I'm still early to learning about it, but it's very cool and super relevant to, just heart health.
As you share this story and the fact that it's very genetic,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that this is involved in clotting gets me thinking about another piece that could be an action piece for people, which is getting metabolically healthy.
Yes.
And then protecting the arteries that way, so we're not creating damage for the Lp(a) to go and attach to and cause a clot.
Yeah. So I think people, if they don't know me, even from this conversation, they're going to know I love to get into the nitty-gritty and the nuances. It's also true that it's important to step back and realize the big picture, which is metabolic health is fundamental to overall health and metabolic diseases, obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease. So if you do get your metabolic health in check, however, whatever lifestyle you use to get there is going to be your biggest bang for your buck. Everything else is just details and tweaking. But since we're on the topic of metabolic health and heart health, there was actually there are two other interesting findings in the heart space that I want to bring up related to metabolic health. One has to do with something called myeloperoxidase. Myeloperoxidase is another test you can get. So you can go and get this test measured. It's a biomarker of oxidative stress, and it's an enzyme in and of itself. And one thing it does is it oxidizes LDL inside arteries. So it can create damage that way. But a new study showed that not only does it create damage to the artery from the inside out, like from the inside of the lumen, but outside in. So there is fat around your arteries. It's called perivascular adipose tissue, PVAT. And if you have obesity, myeloperoxidase in the fat around your arteries has damaging effects, including decreasing energy expenditure, decreasing fat browning, and also decreasing levels of a hormone called adiponectin. And what this does is it actually ends up making your arteries stiffer. So just one more way we're discovering how poor metabolic health harms your arteries. There's a lot of complex ways we can explain this. One analogy I was using, we'll see if it lands with your audience, is like some of these hormones, say adiponectin, it's kind of like a yoga class for your arteries. And you want your arteries to be limber and elastic. And so basically having obesity, having myeloperoxidase production in these fat cells around your vessels is like kicking your blood vessels out of yoga class. But you can lower it by improving your metabolic health, including losing excess body fat. And then the other finding, which is super fascinating, is a new study came out showing how the heart talks to the brain. So literally, if you have plaque in your arteries, there are these things called foam cells. Foam cells are like angry immune cells, angry macrophages. The analogy I've been using for that is Bruce Banner and the Hulk. Bruce Banner, kind of a chill guy, nice guy. You make him angry, he turns into the Hulk, just smashing up, in this case, your cardiac architecture. So foam cells are like the Hulk. They're angry. And one thing they do is send angry messages to the brain. So foam cells in your heart's arteries will spit out little packages, little spheres, literally little spheres, that contain messages called microRNA. They will cross the blood-brain barrier, go to immune cells in the brain, cause metabolic dysfunction, glucose irregulation, and inflammation by activating microglia in the brain. So when I say there's a direct effect of your heart on the brain, it's not just poor vasculature. It's like literally cells in a diseased heart will send messages in little packages to the brain to cause metabolic dysfunction. That is how integrated our organs and generally metabolic health are. Which is, you don't need to understand the details. You do need to be awestruck by how cool that is. Because when you appreciate that's the kind of way our body works, then you stop thinking about a single organ system that you're trying to target through a little tweak and start thinking about caring about your whole overall metabolic health.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Mark Bell, some of you might know him, started the sugar diet. He's a big time influencer, historically low carb keto. Ended up losing a lot of weight doing low carb keto, and he started posting about the sugar diet. He's saying he's losing fat.